Hello, so this is Drugs in Perspective. Chapter 7, Growing Up in an Alcoholic Family System. This chapter focuses on alcoholics in the 1980s. It was an emerging issue that shifted the focus away from the alcoholic addict to the children of alcoholic and addict family system. The children in the alcoholic system compensate to keep the system in homeostasis. By understanding the healing and recovery process for adult children, perhaps this pattern of imbalance can be broken for the next generation.
Hi, my name is Jerry Wise. I'm a therapist in Carmel, Indiana, and I'd like to talk to you today regarding a very important subject for a lot of folks that I see who come to counseling. And this video is entitled, Why Doesn't My Life Work? The Experience of the Adult Child of an Alcoholic, or what is commonly known as ACOA. Adult Child of an Alcoholic, or we call it ACOA issues. I, for many years, worked in inpatient therapy for individuals with addictions and was a family counselor and a therapist in treating addictions and alcoholism, and worked primarily with the families. And for those who grew up in homes where mom and dad were alcoholic or where grandparents were alcoholic, I find also it's not uncommon for an adult child of an alcoholic to, in many ways, be raised by a grandparent. Because when we are actively alcoholic, it's very difficult to parent in a responsible or healthy way. Well, this affects us as kids growing up, and then as a result, affects us as adults. And then we end up with some, or what we call kind of a syndrome of the ACOA syndrome. Abusive drinking in the home, or actually abusive use of any substance in the home, creates difficulties for the family, and particularly for the children growing up. It affects the family, it affects the marriage, it affects establishing what is normal. It has parenting implications, and then it affects our children as they grow up and how they develop as children. And then certainly has future generational effects. What we do today affects our children, and their children after that. So what we do now affects lots of generations in the future, which is why I encourage folks to get help now to help all of the folks who come after us. Janet Woititz, and her name is spelled Woititz, Janet Woititz, wrote the book Adult Children of Alcoholics, which is an excellent book. If you grew up in an alcoholic family, I strongly encourage you to read it. But actually, for many people who grew up in dysfunctional homes, I think it could be a helpful book to read. She offers 13 traits of the adult child of an alcoholic syndrome, which I think are very useful and very helpful. It makes sense for those who grew up in alcoholic homes as to why they have the difficulties they have now, and also it provides some pathways to recovery and to healing and finding better relationships for those who grew up in alcoholic homes. These 13 traits are, and I'd like to share them with you. Then I'd like to share with you some additional traits that I would add from the experiences I've had in working with folks who have had these problems. Number 1, adult children of alcoholics guess at what normal is. When you grow up in a dysfunctional and very problematic home where active drinking is taking place, knowing what normal is not something you learn. Number 2, adult children of alcoholics have difficulty following a project, through from the beginning to the end. Number 3, adult children of alcoholics lie when it would be just as easy to tell the truth. And again, I think of lying as having a number of reasons why we might lie. We lie because maybe we're a pathological liar. Most of the time, people lie because they want to avoid shame. They want to avoid hurting the feelings of others. They want to avoid conflict. And so we'll lie for those reasons. And the adult child of an alcoholic will lie for those reasons. And many times will even lie when they don't have to lie. Number 4, adult children of alcoholics judge themselves without mercy. That's common when you've grown up in an alcoholic home. Number 5, adult children of alcoholics have difficulty having fun. They really do have some difficulties when they've learned about pleasure and learned about joy, learned about celebration, learned about those things all got taught in a very dysfunctional way. So they have difficulty when it comes to having fun. 6, adult children of alcoholics take themselves very seriously. When you take yourself too seriously, it creates difficulties in your life. And oftentimes, over-seriousness creates problems in life. Number 7, adult children of alcoholics have difficulty with intimate relationships. And that's where I come in. People come in with their marriages, their parenting issues, their relationship issues, because they've had difficulty with intimacy. And intimacy is hard if you've grown up in an alcoholic family. Number 8, adult children of alcoholics overreact to change over which they have no control. Again, 8, adult children of alcoholics overreact to changes over which they have no control. And I think that happens because of something they learned growing up in families when so much change was happening while the alcoholic was intensely in their alcoholic pattern, and they're the kids in the family. You've got all kinds of changes happening, and children who grow up in alcoholic homes feel like their lives are out of control, and they have no control over what happens to their lives. Well, this affects us as adults as well. Number 9, adult children of alcoholics constantly seek approval and affirmation. Because we got so little or none at all in terms of approval and affirmation, and maybe mostly got a lot of criticism, shaming, and maybe even abuse, that we then spend the rest of our adult life trying to find approval and affection. And so we actually, I think adult children of alcoholics become addicted to approval and affection. Number 10, adult children of alcoholics usually feel they are different from other people. Growing up in an alcoholic home, you feel very different. That feels normal, and then your normal doesn't feel normal with the rest of the world's normal. So you feel very different, and you feel like you just don't have it understood or as clear as what other people have. Some people will say, how come I didn't get the manual to life and kind of know how it's supposed to be lived and how it's supposed to be done? Number 11, adult children of alcoholics are super responsible or super irresponsible. We tend to be at either end of the pole. And will either overfunction or very much underfunction. Number 12, adult children of alcoholics are extremely loyal, even in the face of evidence that the loyalty is undeserved. In other words, we will find ourselves attached to folks who are probably needy or problematic or dysfunctional, and will come in and overfunction in that relationship and stay loyal no matter how much we get abused, no matter how much we get used, and we continue that loyalty and see it as a virtue no matter how dysfunctional it is. And we just don't change or demand that someone deserve our loyalty or earn our respect and loyalty. We don't do that as adult children of alcoholics. And then number 13, adult children of alcoholics are impulsive. They tend to lock themselves into a course of action without giving serious consideration to alternative behaviors or possible consequences. This impulsively leads to confusion, self-loathing, a loss of control over their environment. In addition, they spend an excessive amount of energy cleaning up the mess. And adult children of alcoholics will see their lives in that way. Let me share with you some additional traits I've found in working with adult children of alcoholics in their marriages and in their relationships and in their careers. I find that adult children of alcoholics have a very severe amount of abandonment issues, and they deal with abandonment, and they become very reactive as a result of that abandonment, and really do struggle with a sense of fear of being abandoned. Number 15, adult children of alcoholics have a lot of trouble seeing their lives at a 30,000-foot view. In other words, they tend to not be able to see the forest for the trees. Or some would say they have difficulty in viewing and seeing their lives in a systems way. They're kind of systems handicapped. And I think viewing life as a system and looking from a systems view is very crucial for recovery. Adult children of alcoholics, in the same light, tend to focus on the content of interactions and relationships and not on the process of what's happening. In other words, the adult children of alcoholic who grow up and then marry an alcoholic, let's say, or an addict, or a workaholic, or an abusive person, what they will do is focus on what that person says, which is the content, and not focus on the process of what's going on. In other words, they take the words over the behavior. And so they don't see what's going on. And that's where I think they have difficulty with the 30,000-foot view. Number 16, adult children of alcoholics tend to get stuck in black and white thinking. And again, either things are either A or B. They don't tend to have a very good sense of what C, option C, would be. It's either A or B. I either do this or I do that, and they don't have many options for C, D, E, F, and G. Number 17, adult children of alcoholics have learned that self should be devalued, and that focusing on self is either harmful or unchristian or unloving or unholy or selfish. If you focus on self, you're being selfish. And they view, again, having self or becoming aware of self or loving self as equals selfishness. And this is common for the adult child of an alcoholic. Number 18, enmeshment and emotional fusion is felt as the norm for adult children of alcoholics. And that separateness or detachment feels very foreign to them. And it's the age-old codependency problem where we're fused with others and we over-focus on others. If you have a real sense of detachment or separateness, it feels very odd and it feels very unusual to have that experience, to actually have a healthy relationship with someone. It feels very abnormal to you. So I wanted to share some of those traits of the adult child of an alcoholic. And again, I would encourage you to read the book by Janet Woititz of Adult Children of Alcoholics. Maybe you've never considered how your parents' drinking affected you and your family, or how it might affect you in your marriage today or in your family today with your parenting, your children, and your own relationship with your spouse. If you want to learn more, I would read Janet Woititz's book. There are other good books on the subject. And give me a call at 317-919-6264. If you have difficulty finding a good counselor, which can be very difficult, and if you have some trouble finding a good counselor, give me a call. We also do Skype and FaceTime. And family systems coaching for those out of the area here in Indianapolis. Whether you're in Maine or Arizona or London or Washington State, we can work with you and help you with the problems that you're struggling with. You can write me or email me. I'll send you a listing of all the videos you can find. I hope today has been a help to you. Have a great day. Thanks for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Jerry Wise, and I'm a relationship expert, self-expert, a life coach, and the director for the Center for Self-Differentiation. And today I'm lucky enough to be down here in Miami South Beach, visiting with my son, and I thought you might enjoy the ocean in the background, and it's a lovely morning this morning. And I wanted to share with you a video entitled ACOAs and PTSD, or Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. Let me explain. An ACOA is someone who has grown up with one or more alcoholic parents or caregiver, or someone who's grown up with a drug-addicted parent or caregiver. There is also a book out there on grandchildren of alcoholics, because they are also affected by the alcoholic disease and may be affected in ways they may not even realize. And I think this video is to raise the consciousness of ACOAs who may not realize that they are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, maybe even P-TSD, certainly because of the alcoholic functioning in the home, and how difficult and painful that was growing up day after day after day. I will use ACOA and ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, or ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, interchangeably. In different parts of the country they use one or the other, and I'll just be using them back and forth interchangeably. I kind of grew up with the ACOA, and now most people say ACA. Having worked with adult children of alcoholics since about 1980, I find these things are true, or have been true. Many are in denial of their family's alcoholism and how it affected them. In fact, there's probably 30 million or more adult children of alcoholics in the United States, and they don't realize how they've been affected by their alcoholic parent growing up with them. They may decide, okay, well, if I just don't drink, then I kind of resolve the problem that my parent had who drank, and then it won't be a problem. I wish that simple answer were true. There's a lot of emotional, mental, psychic, spiritual, interpersonal difficulties that come with being an adult child of an alcoholic. I know many adult children of alcoholics are still in denial of their family's alcoholism and that it had an effect on them. They still live in the don't talk, don't feel, don't think paralysis, and cannot talk about or share the family secret or denial of alcoholism. Many don't even discuss it. Maybe both parents were alcoholic, and their friends don't even know that, or wouldn't even know that. Then even if they do acknowledge their parents' alcoholism and effect on them, they still may minimize the effect on them. And there are many reasons why they would have to deal with, well, there are many reasons why they minimize it or deny it, is because then the ACOA would have to deal with grief, anger, hurt, shame, pain that they would just rather not deal with. Now, the real problem is that by staying in denial, it doesn't fix those problems. In fact, they crop up in many ways, in work, in relationships, marriages, parenting, and it shows up in lots of ways. Many ACAs have a difficult time acknowledging the severity of the impact on them. They may say, yeah, it was rough growing up. Dad was an alcoholic and he smacked us around, and but I deserved it some of the time, and other times I don't think I did. But Mom was real loving and caring, and she made excuses for Dad, and she always wanted us to treat Dad right, even though Dad was the alcoholic, for example. And then they go, so that's basically the story of me growing up in an alcoholic home, but I'm fine now. I wish that were true. And if you are, I think it's a miracle, and I think it's wonderful. But we know that many, many ACAs suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder. And according to Cermak and Brown, and if you want those resources, I'll send them to you, 2 ACOA experts, they state that they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And again, that comes from the years of the minor and major traumatic events or traumas that they experienced while developing as a child and growing up as a child into adulthood. Even some of them continue to experience those traumas even as adults with their continuing alcoholic parents. They are traumatized as they try to connect and get love and acceptance and approval from the alcoholic parent. Recently, I had a client who is probably 39, maybe 40, and she has spent the last 5 years trying to reconnect with an alcoholic father who's also pretty narcissistic, but an alcoholic father, and she just keeps working at it and working at it. He keeps rejecting her, pretzel logicking her, meaning he just talks nonsense, denies his own responsibility, is inappropriate, and she keeps trying to get that love, and has not, and finally has come to realize that Dad can't really do that. The bad news is Dad can't do that, the alcoholic, and maybe the alcoholic father or mother. The good news is they don't have to do that. We can heal within ourselves. We don't need the alcoholic to recover for us to recover. And that's good news. So what are the symptoms? It's a little windy out here. What are the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? And I have it here. I thought I did. Yep. Here. And when they talk about the adult child of an alcoholic, these are the things that they talk about as ACAs experiencing. Number 1, the tendency to re-experience the trauma through obsessive thoughts and the family and compulsive re-emergence of behaviors and feelings in response to symbolic equivalence of the trauma. Put simply, we often find ourselves obsessing about the family and trauma that we've experienced, even unconsciously or consciously, and that we see that trauma or that trauma about to happen in just about everything that's happening around us, in our marriage, and so many times that what happens symbolically in our marriage then triggers us back to our experience growing up in an alcoholic family. And that obsession goes on and is painfully recurring. Secondly, there's psychic numbing with a sense of isolation. PTSD has psychic numbing because there's been trauma, mental and emotional, and a sense of isolation. You just want to be alone, or you just want to, It's hard to connect with other people. You may feel more comfortable not connecting with other people, at least on an emotional basis. Thirdly, there's hypervigilance, and that hypervigilance creates a lot of anxiety. We have a lot of anxiety with it, and we may be scanning all the time and looking to see if anybody's like our alcoholic family. But again, we do this unconsciously, sometimes consciously. But we are very hypervigilant or on guard often. Then number 4, there's survivor guilt, because we have survived that trauma, we have survived those difficulties, and we can have depression as a result of that surviving growing up in that trauma and chronic trauma that's occurring over and over. And then 5thly, there's an intensification of symptoms by exposure to events that resemble the original trauma, such as withdrawal from others. So if a friend withdraws from an ACOA, they then have their abandonment and rejection issues reignited and intensified, because it so mirrors, and it's what's in me from growing up in my family that was alcoholic. And so I become re-traumatized when a friend moves away from me, or when a husband or a wife divorces me, or when a girlfriend leaves me, or a boyfriend leaves me. That re-traumatization. And all of that is a part of that PTSD syndrome. For the ACA, it is so hard to step back and see that they have post-traumatic stress disorder, because the way they feel is all they have known. It's the water they swim in as a fish. It's just the water. I mean, there's nothing special or really bad about it. ACAs were taught to have no needs, no self-care, no self-awareness. These threaten the alcoholic family's dysfunction, and it threatens the unhealthy alcoholic family members. Thirdly, or they may think that if I have PTSD, I shouldn't bother anybody with it, because I shouldn't be bothering people. ACAs always were made to feel that they were bothering everybody, their needs, their wants, needing to be loved, cared for. You're just in the way, you're a bother, because the alcoholic took up all of the oxygen in the family. And so all the focus was on them and not particularly on the children, unless they were focused on in a negative way, as a scapegoat or a golden child or mascot kind of roles. Or they may avoid their PTSD because it is a painful reminder of the past. So they blame their spouse, they blame their boss, they blame friends, they blame themselves, but they don't acknowledge the source of the wound, which goes back to their family. And again, I'm not suggesting that it's not about blaming our family of origin, and it's not about blaming the alcoholic. Blaming is not a healthy state. Acknowledging and recognizing the impact on you, though, is very healthy. Blaming is a different matter. Blaming only keeps us stuck as well. But we do need to acknowledge what has happened from the past, and that what we saw, felt, heard, experienced was real. Even if other family members don't believe us, even if our neighbors, our friends don't believe us, it doesn't matter. Our experience, our subjective experience, should be affirmed in what we believe that happened. Many ACAs suffer high-stress lives of over-functioning or under-functioning, working too hard, working too little, and having not enough in life. They can experience depression, anxiety, relationship failures, finding alcoholic families, finding their family and marriages to be made into alcoholic type of families, even if they don't drink. So many times I work with ACAs who come to me and say, I'm having trouble at work. Work is such a mess. I got this boss who is narcissistic and mean and mercurial and goes up and down. I got these co-workers who are da-da-da-da-da. And once they describe that whole work situation, they see, well, that's my family growing up. I've just recreated my family situation in my work environment. Oh my gosh. And the good news is there's a way out of that. But often we have found jobs like that. So let me share with you. So what can you do if you are an ACOA? Number one, you can get help from a self-expert, an ACOA expert, family systems expert who has ACOA competency. You can go back and heal from your trauma in a resolution way and going through recovery way. I don't think we never stop being an ACA. So it's an ongoing lifelong recovery process. But we can go back and resolve many of the traumas and brokenness that we've experienced growing up so that we get our family of origin out of us. So many of us just want to get out of our family of origin, but then they leave the family of origin in them. A self-expert helps you get the family of origin out of you. Get treatment for your anxiety and depression. Use a safe professional to work with to help you with psychic and emotional numbing. Frozen feelings are common for adult children of alcoholics. Acknowledge that you may be distorting your relationships. You may have some real, true, accurate, reality-based beliefs and feelings. You also may have some distortion. And so for example, we may feel, well, yesterday I felt like my wife loved me. Today, I don't feel like she loves me at all. There's probably a distortion going on. Distortions within me. And because people don't generally love you one day and not love you the next. And again, that process of going back and forth, there's a lot of distortion with that. And we will often feel unloved because we didn't feel loved growing up. Read ACOA literature, the Big Red Book, the Yellow Workbook. Read books on ACOA and videos. There are many. I've got 125 videos on YouTube. Not all of them relate to ACOAs, but several of them do. You can write me for a list of all those videos, or you can join our Family Tree Counseling channel on YouTube. Remember, post-traumatic stress disorder is not caused by just one major event, particularly for the ACOA. It may, and I've had a major traumatic events, probably several in my life, which can cause a post-traumatic stress disorder. However, there can be what we call strain trauma or chronic state trauma, in which it's just chronically chaotic, chronically dysfunctional, chronically rejected, chronically projected onto, something that happens in the alcoholic family every day. And that chronically traumatic environment or life context for the ACOA causes this buildup of PTSD within us. The ACOA often practices defensive exclusion, in which we exclude certain things out of our life and mind, we redefine certain things, we distort certain things, we distort the information from the past. For example, when an ACOA says, you know, I don't think my father's alcoholism really affected me. As they look back on their past, they go, no, it wasn't bad. There's probably a defensive exclusion there. They're excluding their reality, and it's just easier to think that way. They can experience chronic distrust, inhibition of curiosity, a distrust of their own senses, a tendency to find everything unreal. Let me read how one ACOA suffered and describes it in this way. I thought this was a great note. And as one ACOA described it, I look at the world, people, events, and feelings through a filter. It's like a haze, a cheesecloth that mutes the intensity of what's out there and what's coming in. I couldn't tolerate my feelings without this filter. ACOAs use this filter all the time. And the good news is we can heal from that. Lastly, one of the areas I specialize in is in healthy self-differentiation. ACOAs were punished growing up for having a self, being a self. Family enmeshment was equivalent to love. Enmeshment equals love, which is true in our society as well. There was no self in the dysfunctional family, just one big clump of emotional persons. And they all basically shared a self, really. I specialize in learning self-differentiation and becoming separate from your dysfunctional family. And I think that's very critical, to become separate internally from the alcoholic family. There's so much more I could say today, but I've got to end here. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll just fall asleep and go, Jerry, you said enough. If you'd like to work with me, you can contact me. I'm fortunate to be in Miami Beach today. However, I live up in Indiana. Whether you live on the East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, or any country of the world, with the internet, we can work together. I've got many international clients. Please join our YouTube channel.
Childhood in an alcoholic home. Children in alcoholic families learn to distrust their own observations and feelings, and they feel powerless to change the family system. They cannot speak out and cannot trust their feelings. Because the rules in an alcoholic family system are don't talk, don't feel, don't trust. Children in alcoholic families try to control the behavior of the alcoholic parent and the codependent spouse by becoming the super responsible and trying to do everything correctly to obtain parents' approval. Perspective of the child in an alcoholic family. Emma Cork interviewed 115 children living in an alcoholic families. In an attempt to understand the child's perspective, Cork found that the children react to the alcoholic family system in a number of common ways. The interviewed children in alcohol families stated these 12 different things. So they would not dare to go to a friend's house because they would not dare to reciprocate and invite friends at their home due to the unpredictability and embarrassing behaviors of their parents. They were angry at everybody. They were preoccupied at school with worry about what would happen when they returned home, envied their friends who seemed to have fun with their families, felt alone when they were only children, felt neglected by both parents, felt they had to be parent-like, worried about each parent's loneliness if the parents were separated, were unable to separate and individuate from their parents, excuse the alcoholic's behavior, experience multiple separations and reunions of parents, and continue to have problems even when the alcoholic stopped drinking. ACA in relationships. ACA define their sense of identity by the impressions others have on them. ACA have strong, often imbalanced need for affection and affirmation from others, that they are indeed worthwhile. They approach their world from the outside in versus inside out stance of self-confident people. Even though many of my ACA patients have been extremely successful in their personal lives, they still feel inadequate and don't trust their talents, skills, and accomplishments. Many feel that they are charlatans and will be exposed as inadequate. They fear that at any time, their professional abilities may all be taken away from them. Then they will relive their ultimate fear of being all alone, abandoned, helpless, and rejected. The fears that they felt growing up will be played out again. So this is a list of strengths.
Since young children believe their thoughts and feelings are all powerful, they imagine that they cause bad things and may assume their parents drink because of them. A parent may even encourage this belief with remarks like, "Who wouldn't drink with a family like this?" So, leaving the bicycle in the driveway, getting bad grades, or thinking bad thoughts can lead, in the child's mind, to a parent drinking. One of the most important messages children can hear is that the alcoholism is not their fault. Here are the 5 strengths, among others, of an adult children of alcoholics. And we are starting right now. Hello, I'm Ned, and welcome to Uber Mind, the YouTube channel that educates you on your mental health and self-improvement journey. For more content just like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so that you are the first to be notified when there are new video released. Number 1. You can empathize. We're good listeners. Rather, we're exceptional listeners. We've spent so many years thinking about the feelings of others, before ourselves, that we're deeply talented at putting ourselves in other people's shoes. Our ability to empathize is a talent that makes us great friends, partners, co-workers, mothers, aunts. It also makes us great teachers, counselors, or professional advocates and more. It's also a great asset in negotiations. We're likely to speak up for the underdogs, who can't speak for themselves. Number 2. You're independent. Do you have issues with authority figures? So, be your own boss. Because we didn't think highly of the authority figures in charge of us for so many years. We've got lots of opinions about how to run things. And we hold our opinions about those things in high regard. And, of course, we tend to like to be in control. So, run things. We're well suited to be entrepreneurs, or to work in jobs where we might have bosses. But we work autonomously most of the time, since we raised ourselves in many ways. And many of us took responsibility for raising the rest of our families too. We tend to be strong and often more able than others. We can handle hard work, paying our dues, and pushing our limits. We're good with our hands. Because we're strong. Number 3. You're creative. So many children of alcoholics go into the arts. They're actors, writers, and painters. Our sensitivity to animals, to people in pain, gives us a third eye and ear that allows us to see and hear the realities of the human condition. We're brave enough not to be scared off by the discomfort of raw emotions, absurdity, intensity, or oddity, which allows it to inform creative work. Creativity and art also allow people to speak truthfully, which is something that children of alcoholics didn't get many opportunities when growing up. Creating art contributes goodwill to society, and it is also, by its very nature, an act of healing. Number 4. You're resilient. We are serviers. Not just that, but we clearly don't want to repeat the past. Which means we're doing much better than just surviving, which is the bare minimum. Rather, we're growing, healing, and redefining our futures. The definition of resilience is synonymous with children of alcoholics. Resilience, the ability to recover from insult or injury. In physics, resilience means the ability of a chemical or compound to successfully absorb a foreign or bad element and then purge it to recover. Sounds like us. Resilience is also a term used often in ecology study to describe how nature copes and revives itself. We're a lot like that. Our drive often stems from an unconscious urge to heal, to recover, to uncover our real self. Number 5. You're calm. Children of alcoholics would make great emergency room doctors, nurses, technicians, paramedics, or firefighters. We're hard to shock, and we can stay calm in the midst of chaos. It's hard to gross out the child of alcoholics. We've witnessed so much bizarre behavior that we're pretty tough folk. We're far from naive when it comes to what human beings are capable of. It's hard to see nervousness, shyness, anxiety, or fear in a person who's well wrapped. An accidental benefit of having pretended everything was okay, which most of us did growing up in alcoholic families, is that we can appear as if everything is okay. Now, this does obligate us to share ourselves more than we tend to, as well-wrapped people, so that we don't become isolated. You may need to remind your friends and loved ones that you're actually highly sensitive and emotional. In the workplace, a calm exterior is an asset. You can even learn to become that relaxed person you appear to be. So, was this video helpful? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and share with your friends, so we can keep making them. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell. Also, be sure to check our other videos as well. Thanks for watching.
Recovery for adult children of alcoholics. An ACA's prognosis for treatment is directly related to the severity of the parental alcoholism and the levels of abuse, violation, and trauma experienced while growing up in an alcoholic-addicted family system. The onset of the alcoholism is also a factor into the ACA's recovery. The earlier the alcoholism in the family, the younger the child when exposed to direct or indirect consequences of the parent's alcoholism, the more extensive the damage, and therefore the deeper the wounds. Impact ages can have dramatic developmental consequences. Belief system. A major recovery issue at the heart of all ACA problems is their core belief system. The process of recovery includes challenging the deepest core beliefs about others and the self that were constructed to preserve attachments. These core beliefs serve to deny their feelings and maintain the illusion of their parents' normalcy. Once the individual is aware that their belief system is not serving them and is preventing, blocking, or sabotaging the development of effective relationships, the next step is to develop a more reality-based belief system. The first step in developing this reality-based belief system is to recognize the dysfunction and trauma of the past and unlock the feelings denied by this dysfunctional belief system. A trusting therapeutic alliance allows ACA to feel the loss, grief, and trauma of the past. This difficult process involves giving up the old defense mechanisms and dysfunctional beliefs, feeling and choosing to honor and integrate those feelings in a new, more functional belief system.
I'm I'm standing up here in front of you right now at 19 years old, and I'm fighting for my life. No, I'm not battling cancer or dealing with some irreversible disease. I'm fighting the cycle of generational addiction. I am fighting to find my way through life as a young adult without being branded by my family's past history and experiences. You know, one of the most vivid memories of my mother isn't what you think it'd be. It's not her laugh or smile or how she would cuddle me and give me raspberries before bed. No. It's how she would perfectly line up her pills in little groups, day by day for the entire week ahead of her. I mean, she would literally have them laid out at least 6 days in advance. And God forbid if you try to move or touch them in any way. You see, my mother is a prescription drug addict. My mother is a prescription drug addict, and her mother was a prescription drug addict. And my father's mother and father were alcoholics, and their parents were alcoholics, and all died from it at young ages. This came to my awareness when I was about 3. We moved ourselves across country from California to Pennsylvania for my father's career. And when we did this, both my parents believed they had overcome the cycle of addiction. But sadly, my mother fell into old ways. Our histories often have a way of following us. Fast forward to when I was about 10. My mom was agitated and high one night. I mean, she took a lot of mixed pills like usual, but instead of sleeping them off day in and day out, she decided to be a functioning addict that night. And functioning addicts can be the scariest part. I don't know what really happened to set her off, but the next thing I knew, through my eyes as a 10-year-old, she's on one side of the door with a knife trying to shimmy the lock, and I'm on the other with my father, and we're on the phone with 911 and my aunt. I didn't know what was going on or what was happening. And 9 years later, I'm still not quite sure if I do. No one can ever truly understand addiction. My mother soon moved out of the house and my life. The walls were white and bare as me and my father just stared at each other. What was a now 12-year-old girl and a single dad with cerebral palsy supposed to do? How are you supposed to move on after everything that's happened to us within the past couple of years? We just built a life together, just the two of us. And I was heavily involved in the arts program throughout my high school career to focus my energy elsewhere. But more importantly, as I grew older, I wondered, how was I supposed to find my way without following my family's legacy? Sure, I can say no when someone offers me a cigarette or beer, but I've learned that breaking the cycle of addiction isn't that simple. How do I ground myself? You see, everyone in this room is predisposed to addiction through evolution. Harvard researchers have been studying a new science called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the evolutionary pool of certain genes that affects how our brain works. For example, when you eat something yummy, it triggers pleasure, and that pleasure drives us back to that food, kind of like an automatic light switch turning on and off. So epigenetics works in the same sense that it turns certain genes on and off. But yet, there's a hyperactive genetic component to epigenetics. In the world of addiction, if you have a mother who's an addict, and she passes down her epigenetics to someone like me, that makes me 50% more likely to be an addict. Add in the environmental factors and the heritage, that makes me 4 times just as likely to be an addict. So humans and animals are similar in this regard, except humans have the capacity to control this evolutionary pool. You see, there's yet another component in this equation for addiction to occur: choice. Despite my legacy, despite the risks, despite genetics, and despite epigenetics, we ultimately make a choice that leads us down the path of addiction. You see, every alcoholic took that first drink, every addict used that first drug, and it's knowing one's risks and knowing my risks that I know not to go down those paths. Every now and then, I receive a text message from my mother, who's in hospice, dying from drug abuse organ failure. And of course, as our system goes, They have her on all the prescription drugs that destroyed her life. Sometimes the texts are lucid, other times belligerent, lashing out. So up on the screen, I have a picture of a text message from my mother. "You need to take a class on mental illness. I have hurt you over the years, but you've hurt me too, and I cannot take it anymore. I'm giving up." She's telling the psychology major to take a class on mental illness and to feel empathy towards her. Despite my rational understanding, these make me feel hurt. This woman, who by birth is my mother, realizes I'm not there. But yet, as I too fight for my life, she's not here either. See, what I've realized that if we are to stop addiction, we must put ourselves before the addiction. So while my mother left me so many years ago, I too must now distance myself. Sure, in a sense, I can forgive her for what she's done, but that doesn't make her actions excusable. While figuring out how to do this in my teenage years, I realized something. We are more than our family's legacy and past. We don't have to let it define us. If we define ourselves or let others define us as someone who isn't capable of being more than that statistic, more than that mental illness, more than that will-be college dropout, we will live our whole lives believing that we aren't capable of being more than that, rather than taking advantage of opportunities to change that, to rewrite our fate. So, I started defining my own path. I fell in love with adolescence addiction counseling after having an intern for my high school senior project. I discovered how many children like me were going down that path of addiction, and I swore from that point on, that was my purpose in life, to help those kids. I discovered how I can help them while still making sure I stay on that correct path as well. It's said that life gives us second chances. In my case, I pray that life gives us fifth chances, because I am fighting, like so many others, to break the generational cycle of addiction that is my family's legacy. What's most scary is that I cannot tell you I'll break it. Only time will prove that. But as I stand here in front of you on this stage, I am doing it. Thank you.